Hi everyone, my name is Simon, and today we're going to make some chicken stew. So this is my favorite Instapot recipe, mainly because of how much effort it takes to make this. It's really only about 10 minutes of prep time, 15 minutes total for cooking, and then you have some delicious stew. So for this, we're going to use potatoes, an onion, a large tomato, and some bone-in chicken thighs. If you don't have an Instapot or a pressure cooker already, I highly recommend you get one. Pressure cookers are incredibly useful for a lot of different things. What it does is it cooks food under very high pressure. It creates a pressurized container in here, and it allows you to cook food at a higher temperature than you normally would be able to, say, in a pot like that. So you're able to cook food in a fraction of the time. I often use my Instant Pot mainly for this recipe, to be honest. Along with cooking rice, ribs, different meat. You can saute in this. Boil. You can do a lot of different things. And for this recipe, yeah, overall it's a 15-minute cooking time. So first, I'm going to take some onion. We're just going to cut it up into slices. I don't have much kitchen space, or counter space, oops, with the pot and my cutting board. These are still good, right? So we're just going to slice these up. And for these, so you're going to want to use about 1 medium onion. For that, just slice it up and put it in the pot. For this, I recommend using Yukon Gold potatoes. If you use russet or red potatoes, I would peel off the outer layer because it gets a little bit, the skin's kind of furry almost. So for these, you're just going to want to cut them up. I wouldn't cut these up to be too small because they can get a little bit mushy if you do cut them too small, so I just cut them in half and then I cut it in half again so I can quarter them. I'm gonna do the last one. Toss that in there. And for this, I recommend using the biggest tomato that you can find. I find that it really gives the stew a good flavor if you use a lot of tomato. You can use a beefsteak tomato like this one. You can a large one. You can use smaller Roma tomatoes and just a few of those, and then toss them in there. For these, I'm gonna cut them up into chunks. So this recipe is a complete copy of Kenji Lopez Alt recipe on his channel. I believe that he said his wife showed him this. Recipe that I'm showing you is very similar. I am, however, changing just a few different things. One being, I like adding sofrito into the Instant Pot while you're cooking this. Sofrito's a tomato cooking base. It's used in a lot of Hispanic dishes. I think mainly Puerto Rican dishes. And for this, just gonna grab a spoon and then take a little bit and put it in there. I think it gives it an even more of a tomatoey taste. I think it just gives it more flavor. Use a few of those. I am also going to add some crushed red pepper. And if you don't have sofrito on hand, a good alternative is tomato paste. And just a teaspoon, tablespoon, you know, somewhere in between, and just put it in there. This recipe is very forgiving. You do not need to follow this by the tea. It's going to come out good no matter what. Then I'm gonna toss in a few bay leaves. These are a little bit older, so I'm gonna put just a few in there. And for this, I'm going to use chicken thighs. You can use any chicken you want, as long as it's skin on, bone in. I've used drumsticks, I've used chicken legs that I get the thigh and the drumsticks. I've used bone in, skin on, chicken breast. I've noticed that the chicken breast doesn't come out as good. You really get you get really good flavor if you use this dark meat, like chicken thighs, or if you use a chicken leg. I've noticed that it gives it more flavor. Now that that's in there, I'm gonna put some pepper. I want to be generous with the pepper. And for this recipe, you do not need to add any stock of any kind. And typically that's the last thing that you want to do when you pressure cook. When you are using a pressure cooker, you do want to put some liquid in there so that their steam is created, which creates pressure. In this case, we're putting a lot of ingredients in here that has a lot of water content in it. Like the chicken in the skin, the tomatoes, the potato, onions. As the Instant Pot gets higher in temperature, it's going to extract that water, and then that will then create the steam for it to start to pressurize. I have also done this recipe by adding a little bit of beef stock or chicken stock, and that also comes out great too, but it's not, you don't need to. So because I'm not going to add any stock, I am going to use a generous portion of salt. Not too much. I'm just going to use some coarse salt. And now I'm just going to mix it up. Just get it all incorporated. Break up the onions a little bit. Now that that's looking good, let's close this up. So I'm using the Instant Pot brand. If you have a different pressure cooker, it should still be the same cook time. I'm going to set this to pressure cook. Gonna set it on high pressure, and I'm going to cook it for 15 minutes. And I'll see everyone once this is done cooking. Alright, and we're back to the only cooking show that's ever existed on YouTube, and the stew is now done. Now that it's finished, I'm going to turn it off. This says 5 because it's keeping it warm. It's just timing it how long it's been kept warm for. So just going to turn it off. For Instant Pots, I can see that it still has pressure from this little guy being raised. When it releases pressure, it's going to go down. So let's do that. You can really smell it. It smells delicious. Gonna get a bowl and a ladle ready. Yeah, so in total, I was looking back, I know that I said about 10 minutes of prep. It realistically was about 5. And with 15 minutes of cooking time, once the Instant Pot comes to pressure, it probably takes about 8 minutes for it to actually get to pressure, then add it on with the 15-minute cooking time. So in total, we're looking at about less than a 30-minute recipe, and it's incredibly easy. It's really just cutting up some vegetables, throwing in some chicken, and then turning it on. I've also added sausage in here along with the chicken. That's come out really good too. In my fridge I just had a few sausage that they were gonna go bad soon, so I was gonna be making this anyway, so I just decided to throw it in there. And it also added a lot of good flavor. So before, we did not add any stock as we were putting everything inside the Instant Pot. And now you're gonna see all of that stock that was created from pulling all the water content out of the chicken, the potatoes, the tomatoes, and the onions. This is basically a very concentrated stock. So let's grab some. This is why I kept the potatoes on the larger side. If you do cut, like I said before, if you do cut them smaller, they will get a little mushy. Kind of like it. They still fall apart, but they're not mushy if you keep them about this size. So let's get some in there. What goes really well with this is a piece of bread too. If you have some really nice fresh bread, it's great to dip that into the stew, so you can get some good broth in there. Let's get in there. Get some tomatoes. You won't really notice the onions much because they just kind of go translucent and almost melt into the stew itself. I'm gonna grab, typically I'll eat this with a spoon. Also like grabbing a fork. And you can see everything's cooked just after 15 minutes, and it really just pulls apart. It's very tender. So let's give this a try. If you don't add the sofrito and if you use smaller tomatoes, the broth doesn't come out as red. The sofrito is also good if you're not going to be adding garlic. If you aren't going to add sofrito, I mentioned before you can add some tomato paste. I would also recommend adding a little garlic as well if you're not going to be using sofrito and just putting in some tomato paste. Yep. Let's try the chicken. I actually have some some boring classic white bread that I got at Whole Foods. This really goes better if you use nice bread, like some French bread, a baguette. But this will work too. Yep. And there you have it. A really good chicken stew that takes less than 30 minutes total. Thanks, everybody.